Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ray. I'm a detransition male, and today I want to talk about the fundamental neuroticism of living as a trans person, particularly as a trans woman, as a trans identified male. So, this was one of the fundamental reasons why I detransitioned because living as a trans woman, attempting to pass as a female and constructing this persona of this female persona where you're trying to get everyone else to acknowledge and validate the fact that you are a woman. That is just fundamentally conducive towards the generation of neuroticism. And I want to illustrate this with an example from the trans activist Katie Montgomery. So, if you don't know who Katie is, he has been a trans activist for a long time. I think he transitioned back in before 2017. So he's been around for a while. He's not some baby trans. Like he has, been living as a trans woman for, like 8 years or something like this. And also, he's not like the least passable trans woman that exists. Like he's reasonably passable for like a trans woman, but even still, it doesn't matter because this is the thing. They say that transition is a cure or treatment for dysphoria, but it just it just leads to neuroticism. So let me share the story that he shared. He said, on a night out, having a good time with my friends, a lady comes over and interrupts our conversation to say that I'm beautiful. That's nice, but to be honest, I was a little sus from the delivery. Friends joined other convos, whatever, and she comes over and says it again. Like a lot of people, I'm not really a fan of compliments, but I'm trying to be more accepting of them, so I politely say thanks. She then says it again and says, as a cis woman, I'm jealous of how beautiful you are. Maybe this will sound stupid or spoiled or ungrateful or I don't know, but that killed my night on the spot. Felt like being punched in the stomach. I think she was probably trying to signal that she was supportive of trans people or whatever, but it just didn't land. It felt a little bit, wow, you're not bad for a tranny. Felt a bit, you stood out, and I want to support freaks with all the genuinely overwhelming oppressive horrors going on at the moment. I just do not want to stand out. I feel like I do my bit fighting for myself and people like me every day, but sometimes I just want to disappear and be normal. I'm sorry, but I do just genuinely hate being recognized. I hate being treated differently. It's awful. Up there with one of the worst things about what I do. But this lady asked what my name was, so she didn't recognize me. She clocked me. And in a really clumsy, patronizing way, it hasn't happened in ages. Maybe I'm just whining about being clocked. I don't really know. Hard to put into words. But what is true is that if she had said nothing, I would have had a better night. Maybe if you're a cis person and you see someone you think is trans, it's best not to walk over and be condescending about their appearance. If you want to be supportive, then treat us like everyone else. You're genuinely not doing a good thing if you deal out some compliment you don't truly mean. I think part of it too is that part of my coping system for how horrific things are at the moment is a blind belief that maybe I can escape most of the targeting. Faith destroyer. Blah, what a garbage end to a good night. If this just seems like a whiny privilege bullshit, then sorry, it probably just is that. No one is strong all the time. I'm not a robot. Okay. So keep in mind, this is a good, supposedly a success case for trans women. He is reasonably, passable, you know, uh, has like a good job and integrated into society, on the hormones and all this stuff, transitioned and like, seems reasonably mentally well adjusted, and like an activist and all this stuff. And it's like, yet still a simple compliment has the ability to be a knife in the stomach to ruin your entire night. That is not normal. That is not healthy. That is indicative of the fact that trans identity is fundamentally conducive towards neuroticism. This is something that I experienced all the time when I was trans. That little background anxiety about being clocked, about, feeling like a freak, like, feeling like you just want to be normal. That never goes away. Transition never heals that wound. It doesn't. So it's just papering over a wound. It's sweeping the wound under the rug. It's it's just it's not actually healing the root cause. So transition is not a cure for gender dysphoria. It often just makes things worse because you never become comfortable with yourself. You never settle in. You're always on edge. You're always, on the lookout for these little clues that someone has clocked you. And our liberal progressive society has sort of allowed, it it sort of gives these trans women a false sense of integration because many people just will ignore things or they will just be polite and not comment. And so these trans women will go walk around thinking that they're passing when in reality people are just being polite and they're just they sort of know that you're sort of not supposed to say anything or draw attention to the fact that someone is like a trans woman or a male. But most people can tell, like 99% of trans women are exactly Katie's situation or worse, or people can tell. And it's, and like Katie is like pretty reasonably passing for like, a trans woman, which just goes to show that it's almost impossible for men to fully pass as women in these situations. You can always tell there's some little clue that clocks you. And that leads to neuroticism. And this is one of the fundamental reasons why I detransitioned was I craved that feeling of normality. I hated feeling like a freak. And that feeling of being like a freak never goes away. And the fact that little tiny things like being called beautiful can completely ruin your day, completely ruin your night. Like that is indicative of that trans identity is fundamentally unhealthy. There's a sort of narrative in the trans activist world that trans identity is perfectly healthy and normal. It's just that trans identity can correspond incidentally with gender dysphoria, but it's the gender dysphoria itself that is the mental illness. That is the pathology, but trans identity itself is perfectly normal. But my contention would be that actually, no, it's not just the dysphoria that's pathological. It is the identity it is itself. It is fundamentally the desire to pass yourself off as the opposite sex. That desire is fundamentally disordered. It is fundamentally objectively disordered to have a desire to pass yourself off as the opposite sex. And so we need to discourage people from thinking that transition is going to solve their problems, that it's going to lead to a resolution of their deep, psychological and spiritual and emotional wounds. Because most trans identity is a result of some kind of disordered, mental state due to, it is fundamentally pathological. And so I just don't think that we are doing these people adequate service by suggesting transition as like a pathway to solving these issues, because it doesn't solve the issues. And this is someone who's been transitioning for 8 years. So this is not going to go away. Like Katie is going to have to live with that feeling of being a freak for the rest of his life. Because to some extent, that internal feeling of being a freak is the mind's recognition of the truth. Because to be honest, it is freaky. It is, because it is not natural. It is not normal. It is not healthy. It is not a good thing to go down this pathway. It is not healthy or normal to try and pass yourself off as the opposite sex. And so that feeling of being a freak is a fundamental recognition of the truth. That is your conscience written on your heart by God telling you the truth, that it's not normal and it's not healthy, and it leads to neuroticism and psychological problems. And often these things get worse. They get worse over time. It doesn't get better. It never gets better. There's always going to be this wound. There's always going to be this deep desire to be normal, because you recognize it's not normal. It's not healthy. So, all right. Well, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Take care and God bless. Bye-bye.